Hello and welcome to the HII Method podcast. My name is Jen Hatz. I am the host of the HII Method podcast here with my co-host Jarret Eaton, and I'm also the founder of the HII Method. I actually found something. And Jarret actually made a joke right away when he asked about what the HII Method is. He said, "Does this have anything to do with the weed legalization in Arizona?" I said, "Not quite. If anything, high on life." But the HII Method is this is a holistic and integrative and innovative approach to optimizing health and well-being and performance. And it's a method that I've shaped and developed over the years of working with athletes and even with non-athletes with just health and wellness populations. And it's something that I'm now excited to share with everyone all over the place through this podcast, so that way everyone is able to acquire the information that they truly do need in order to live well and be well and just live well-rounded. So welcome to the podcast. I'm excited. This is our first episode. Jarret, I would love if you started just right away, introduce yourself to our listeners and to everyone out there, explain who you are and what we're doing here.
Exactly. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here at the HII Method. Again, I am your co-host here with Jen. Super excited to bring you this content. And just to give you a little bit about myself, I am a ex-retired track and field athlete. I've run professionally for about 10 years now. I went to Syracuse University, go Cuse, and I'm a proud alumni. And I made my way to Phoenix, Arizona, is where I currently live, by way of my sport. And so in retirement, I started to work at a company called Neuroforce One. It is a strength and conditioning facility. They do a really amazing job at turning out professional athletes. Got a high level of success there, and I am their marketing director. And so in addition to being the marketing director, I'm also a coach. So I coach at Brophy and Xavier High School out in Phoenix, Arizona, and I coach track and field. And so I've started a program there where I help track and field athletes get into strength and conditioning, as well as other sports. But mostly my job is as a high school coach. I do track and field. So I know speed, I know conditioning, and I'm super excited to work with all the talented athletes that are there. So that's just a little bit about myself and what I'm doing right now. So super excited to be here with you today.
Love hearing how excited you are, and just love hearing the fact, first of all, we actually have a lot in common. For those who don't know, I'll explain a little bit about my background here. So I'm a registered dietitian and also a certified strength and conditioning specialist. And I also have a background in psychology. I have a few degrees kind of across a few different areas. And I've worked across the last 10, 12 years in a variety of different ways, but primarily with athletes and high performance populations, including collegiate and professional and Olympic athletes. And there was also a unique connection with Jarret's previous team, Team USA Track and Field. I actually know his former dietitian that he worked with. So
sure do.
It's an interesting small world, the sports performance world, actually.
Yeah, it really is.
And so now we both are coming together through this, partnered with Neuroforce One. This is a NF1 for short, but Neuroforce One is this human performance company. And they have, like Jarret is there within their facility, which is in the Phoenix area out there in the desert. And they also have a remote training option as well. That is something that right in my bread and butter. I love being able to work from home and work remotely. And I think that's probably the best way to start introducing what we want to talk about here throughout the podcast, starting right away on that difference between what it means to work in person in the heat, especially out there in the desert, versus maybe working remotely with athletes. So, Jarret, tell me, what is it like? First of all, I mean, it's hot out there. So what is it like actually like as an athlete and as a coach, being out there in the heat, especially right now? It is summer, so it's even hotter than normal. So talk to me about that. What is it like?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting challenge. I'm originally from Philadelphia, PA, so we know the heat, but it's a different type of heat out here. And so that's something I've also had to struggle with, no matter where I was, living in South Carolina as well as the heat. And so it's a challenge because I'm not able to fully get the most out of myself when I'm overheating, as well as my kids. And I know if I'm standing there coaching my high school kids and I'm hot, and they're going to be hot doing activities and sprinting. And so I think it's definitely been a real challenge for me to understand ways to keep them cool during this activity. And so I've tried to do a bunch of different things as far as like change practice time to make sure that we're trying to be out of the direct sunlight. But Jen, I think this is why we started this podcast, is I have a bunch of questions on how do I make myself a better coach. And so let me ask you a question, Jen. What are some other ways that I can help my athletes perform at a high level, but also make sure that they're not like frying out in the sun?
I love that you are concerned right off the bat about that, because this has to be the most major component to working with athletes or being an athlete yourself. This is quite literally the only part that is life and death when it comes to working with an athlete or working out yourself. There is no other area when it comes to being a coach or a trainer or a dietitian working with an athlete. There's no other area where your concern needs to be greater than in the area of proper hydration and proper body cooling techniques, because that is quite literally life and death. And if there is misinformation or just a lack of true understanding, you're not really going to know, but you're risking life and death. Like, I cannot stress enough that this is the absolute most important part of being an athlete, or just being in general in the heat and trying to maintain your core temperature. But working with athletes, especially, like, this is number one. This is absolutely number one. And the reason why I have such a strong stance on this is because this is precisely what I've focused on and found myself unintentionally needing to focus on over the years of working with individuals and working with athletes. I kept getting drawn to the same topic over and over, and I knew that there was a reason for that, because it's something that is so extremely crucial and so often overlooked or misunderstood. And it's not until it's too late that we look back and realize, oh, I should have identified these things beforehand. So to kind of first of all, thank you for expressing concern over it, because it is a major concern.
Of course, like you just said, I'm not trying to have anybody die on my watch. That's like traumatizing.
No one wants that. Right. Traumatizing, to say the least. But yeah, and interesting enough, it's not necessarily specific to the location where you can run into issues. So like you said that you've lived in you said Philly. And there's a heat in itself there. You lived in South Carolina, you said. There's a heat in itself there. I am originally from Chicago. I lived in Florida for 12 years, and I currently live in Pittsburgh. All of those locations also have their own heat that is its own beast in itself. And you could say a lot of that is because at the location that you live in, you may or may not be acclimated to the heat of that location. You may or may not be acclimated to the changing climate conditions at that location. And that's something that I, not to make a major hippie plug here, but that's something that we're all kind of facing, that there's a lot of changing climate conditions, and that's going to directly impact how well or how unwell you acclimate to those changing climate conditions. If it's all of a sudden hot one week, whereas last week it was cold, you're at a disadvantage. So there are some constantly changing variables. And again, because of the location that you live in, you're going to have your own heat, your own different layers that you have to navigate around. So some of the locations that I've worked in, and especially worked with athletes in those locations, trying to first identify some of those key areas that you want to focus on, so that way you do have a sense of control over the heat, or at least how the athletes are responding to the heat. Because we can't always control the heat. But if you, first of all, let's say you have access to a facility where there is shade, just being able to get out of direct sunlight can be a big difference maker. So let me ask you that, first of all. Do you have access to shade, or are you guys in the direct sunlight the entire time?
Trees are hard to come by here in Arizona. And so what we've been able to do is have a tent. So do tents work?
Absolutely.
A little bit of shade.
As long as you're not sitting in direct sunlight that entire length of time that you are in practice, that's a huge, huge, huge step in the right direction.
Okay.
And then, and you had mentioned the time of day too. So tell me about the time of day that you guys are working with.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what, I'm not a huge morning person, and so having to wake up at 5:30 to go practice at 6 a.m. is really tough. So I'd like to try to avoid that if possible. And I'm thinking about performance and stuff. I'm not sure if they're even the optimal selves at 6 a.m. But so we'll either go early in the morning to kind of avoid the heat before it gets heated up, or we'll go at night as it's cooling down. So again, it's getting dark and we don't always have access to light. So that presents its own challenge in of itself. So I'd go around like 6 o'clock as the sun is getting down, and therefore it is still hot, but as they're in their main event cycle or training phase, it's cooler then. So they're sprinting, they're doing the hardest part of the workout when it's cooler. So it's already, the sun is going down and it's starting to get dark. So those are the 2 times of the day that I try to do our activities in.
I love hearing that first of all, you're trying to aim for the time of day that is not the hottest part of the day. That would be
Yeah.
ideal.
Yeah.
The less ideal side of it is that what we're talking about are two completely different times a day. And you mentioned it, that right away, first thing in the morning, probably not the most ideal for the athletes to be able to start putting out some effort, especially when it comes to being able to control their core temperature, their body regulation, because they have not yet had a chance to really properly hydrate after a night of sleep. And this is where I've actually seen, especially, I'll back up a bit. A lot of the work I've done has been within college football. So you're working with an entire team of athletes all at once, and you have to find a way to have practice for a length of time during a time of day that is conducive to everyone's schedules. And that's often the biggest thing, is that you got to fit schedules around it too.
Yeah.
So I've often had, over 100 athletes all at once training at a certain block of time in the morning. The chances that all of those athletes, let alone any of those athletes, are properly hydrated and fed by the time that they start working out is such a slim to none chance that that's actually happening. So that right there sets you up for a major risk. A major risk because your ability to cool down your core temperature, like when you're moving around and it's hot out, the only way that you can actually cool down, besides, starting to remove yourself from the heat, so that way you don't have direct sunlight continuing to heat you up.
Yeah.
But then the other major part is that you are using your body's own water in order to transport that excess heat from inside of you to outside of you. And that's what we see as sweat.
Okay.
So sweating is a good thing. It means that your body is thermoregulating. Your body is actively cooling down. It's not a bad thing. We don't want to block sweat. And I'm going to go into a whole bunch more detail about this in a separate episode in itself, because it is such a big topic. Anything related to hydration and body cooling is such a big topic that they are their own episodes, their own topics. But for the sake of today, I know I get really excited when I talk about this because of how important it is. So, and this is the thing. So I've seen some interesting strategies that different coaches or personnel would take with how to try their best to schedule or optimize the time of day and the conditions that they're training athletes in, so that they're getting around this heat of the day, right? And so what we had just talked about with the time of day, that first thing in the morning may seem at first like it's the best option. And in a way, hormonally, it might be, because you're going to have more of a surge of cortisol hormone first thing in the morning, really around like 9 a.m.-ish. So performance-wise, under normal conditions, if all is controlled for, you would probably have a better performance during that morning window of time if it's not too early. But you have the complete contrast of that performance, saying that, well, you just woke up, and the chances that you actually have hydrated to come out of sleep and actually hydrated appropriately and actually fed yourself appropriately is so limited that any performance benefit you might be banking on is probably going to go out the window anyway, because you haven't yet made up for that hydration difference. So when you're going throughout the whole night without taking in fluids, you're losing fluids. So when you wake up, you already got to start taking in fluids. And you have a limited amount of time to take in fluids for your body to be at a real nice, balanced, hydrated state. That would be the state that we would like to begin practice at an already you hydrated, you're already well hydrated when you start practice. That's what we want as our ideal time of day to start practice, is when we're ideally hydrated.
Okay.
So on the flip side of that, if it's near the end of the day or near the evening, chances are you've had that much more time throughout the day to take in food and fluids appropriately, to accommodate the food and fluids appropriately throughout the day. So that way you're not holding on to any excess in your system, but you've also had enough that you've taken in throughout the day. So at that point in time, and now you're trying to, beat the heat of the day. So the sun's going down. So maybe it's a little cooler temperature wise, but at least you know that your body is a little more prepped and prepared to handle the changes of needing to release that excess heat compared to the first morning hours, which I know it sounds very, very different from some of the other approaches where it's like, no, we got to get them first thing in before the heat of the day. But really, you, the human being, are responsible for thermoregulating. So if you, the human being, if you have not yet prepared your body enough to thermoregulate, it doesn't matter how much you try to take a water break during practice, you've already started in deficit.
Okay. See, I never thought of it that way. I always thought, well, for one, I just was like, I'm not awake. So, and then two, I always thought about food and fuel, like some of our kids don't eat, and, I wouldn't be able to eat first thing in the morning either. So a lot of times I would literally just, like me as the athlete, the old retired athlete, would just wake up and just go to practice. And I thought that would be fine. Or I'd try to eat a bar along the way. But I know we're running very short on time, but I just have one question, because you mentioned something that sparked my interest, was like, is it impossible to hydrate them before? And what is the window of hydration? So if I wanted to make sure that they're up early, at what time should I wake them up to make sure that they have enough fuel or, fluids in them to then be able to practice at 6 a.m.?
Such a great question, because this is precisely what I would have to navigate around when, the schedule is set for the team. Like, there is no going around the schedule. So it's like, all right, you do what you can to find the best way to work with what you got, right? That's the nature of life, right? So under those circumstances, what you just said, so let's say that it's an early morning practice that we already have set in the schedule, and that's what it is. We don't have a way to move that around. Okay. That being said, what you don't want to do, first of all, I'm going to start with what you don't want. You don't want to cut into their sleep. They need that sleep. They need especially that sleep that is in the morning hours. So if you think of sleep throughout the night, hopefully they're sleeping throughout like a full night. But the first half of your night of sleep is your deep sleep. That's a little more restorative for your body. The second half of your sleep throughout the night is your REM sleep. It's going to be primarily REM sleep, and that is doing a whole lot more for your actual cognitive processing, your memory, your emotional regulation, your ability to handle stress. So a lot of those athletes, their ability for them to cognitively have a fully recovered, repaired, ready to go state mentally, you don't want to cut into that REM sleep. So you don't want to start inching their wake up time early and earlier, because you're going to cut them off of like really the big thing that they need to be able to function throughout the day. So if there's an ability to not cut them off of sleep, allow them to sleep at least ideally as much sleep as we can get them, especially young athletes. But then hydration. So trying to make up for hydration in a limited amount of time before you have to work out. This is actually a huge, huge topic that I'm going to talk about in its own episode, because well, I'll just plug this. What I have seen personally, what I've witnessed personally, and this is actually why I take the approach I do, and a major part of why I'm so adamant about advocating for the HII method and not for the other traditionally used methods or the previously done methods, is because there is a very, very big difference, and I think a misunderstanding, between what it means to achieve hydration in a limited amount of time versus trying to force hydration and pre-hydrate through forced intake. And what I mean by that is your body can only accommodate so much at a given time. So if you have a limited window of time to try to take in fluids and take in electrolytes, you have to find the appropriate concentration or balance of both, because trying to chug a whole bunch of fluid, trying to take in a whole bunch of whatever variety of electrolytes, whether it's the appropriate concentrations or ratios or not, or, and this is going to be a big topic that I talk about throughout this entire podcast, or taking even more drastic measures of trying to prehydrate, these can be directly impacting your system in a negative way. To say that, I'm not going to go into details yet because it's a really big topic, and it's going to open a lot of eyes, and it's going to reveal a lot. There's a lot that needs to be revealed that goes on behind the scenes at some of these programs.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Scandalous, right? It really is scandalous. But so there are safe ways to hydrate appropriately in a quicker manner versus unsafe ways. We're going to save the unsafe ways for another day to discuss in depth what that looks like. The safe ways to do it is just like a quick rule of thumb. Think of a 16-ounce bottle. 16 ounces is like a pint. So think of a pint or two of water with at least 1,000 milligrams of sodium. You can get that from an electrolyte powder or packet. You can also get it from little table salt. I know it might not sound appetizing to add some table salt to water, but what I've done is actually I'll show you a little. Okay, so if this bottle here, this is a 32-ounce bottle. If I have this and I add half a teaspoon of table salt, I know it sounds gross. It's not gross, I promise. Add half a teaspoon of table salt to it, and just like one or two just flavored water packets. Nothing crazy. No, you don't really need to be adding a whole lot of sugar. If there's a little bit of sugar, it's okay. That combination is going to provide you with a real nice ratio of fluid and electrolytes in the appropriate concentration so that you're not overdoing it or underdoing it in any way, and you're not risking a whole lot of GI upset either. So you can get some stomach aches and some even worse symptoms if you're rushing the process or taking some alternate routes. So that at least can give you like that first step if you have no other option before an early practice. So again, you don't want to cut off their sleep too early. So let them sleep as best as possible, but then make sure that you have, if you only have access to like the 16-ounce bottles, make sure you get them 2 bottles and some combination of electrolytes so that they're getting at least 1,000 milligrams of sodium.
Okay.
So I'll give you more details in future episodes, I promise, because I know everyone's going to be like wanting it.
Jen, I cannot wait. Listen, like literally my mind is like, I have this, I want to know more. I want to know this, that, and the third, which is awesome. But I know we're definitely out of time. But just to kind of recap some of the things we talked about, making sure that they're out of the sun, direct sunlight, no good. So which is good. We also have tents, and so anybody else who's practicing out there, just don't be baking in the sun. Second thing is making sure that they are hydrated before their activity. And then depending on the time, we talked about making sure, proper hydration methods. But man, I think that is enough to get me start to thinking about, planning my next session and definitely fighting against that early morning practice, I guess, now backed by science. So it's not even just, I don't feel X, Y, Z. It's no, this is actually what's happening within your bodies, which is perfect. But awesome, Jen, I cannot wait to talk more about these topics. Literally, I feel like the more that we talk, the more information that I get from you, I'm just going to be an amazing coach, and it's all going to be because of you. So I'm super excited to have more of these conversations and pick your brain about all the topics that I can just dream up of.
I love hearing that. And just the fact that you're prioritizing wanting to be the best coach that you can be, and it's because you know that you have this unique opportunity to have a positive impact on those athletes that you're working with. And that right there that's everything. That is what it really takes to be a quality coach in someone's life is, regardless of what the type of coach is or what they are coaching you in, having that perspective that you want to have the most positive impact you can on these individuals. And that's exactly what the HII Method is about. So it's if you're, if anything, you're high on life because you're having that positive impact and you're spreading it around to other people.
I sure am. Thank you so much, Jen.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for chatting with me on this first initial episode of the HII podcast. And for everyone else, stay tuned for these upcoming topics that we are going to dive into even deeper and explore even more ways that we can have that positive impact, not only on ourselves, but on everyone else around us.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.